going to invite Dr. Margaret Flowers to join us on the panel. So glad to see that you were able to make it. Right, yes, that's quite an experience if you don't do it often. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Charles Robideau, and he's going to attempt to help us gain some understanding of what legislation is currently out there on the healthcare reform front. So, Charles.
From here, it looks like a very good group out there. Lurla, you pointed out that in 2007, January through April, you had to pay $9,561.85 for your employees' health care. And that by this year, same months, that expenditure had more than doubled. I'd like to give you some corresponding figures for another part of the industry. In the year 2007, the 15 largest health insurance companies had combined profits of $15 billion. Their profits in the year 2000, at the start of the Bush administration, were $3.5 billion. They went up more than triple. Now that's just profits. That does not include the amount of administration and publicity and lobbying and all the other expenses that they put up. So when you're talking about how to pay for health care expansion and reform, that's a big source of money there that nobody's talking about in Washington. Now, the single-payer bills would eliminate that. Bobby Scott, to his great credit, is a sponsor of House Bill 676, by which everyone would have a card with which they could go to any doctor in the world or in this country and get care. And one of the slanders that's put forth about the single-payer system is that it would put a government bureaucrat between you and your doctor. And that is a dead lie. And I wish, Bobby, that you could get all of the other 83 sponsors, or 82 sponsors plus you, of 676 to nail that slander and stand up and shout that, look, you may not want to vote for 676, but at least talk about it the way it is. Now, in the Senate, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont has put in his single-payer bill, another excellent bill, and the Senate Bill 703. And one of the questions we have to ask is there any chance for these bills to go anywhere, given the systematic and determined campaign against these bills that comes from everywhere, from the White House, I have to say, on down? And they won't even talk about it. Margaret Flowers testified to the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee earlier this month, and she was the first single-payer advocate who had been invited to testify in any Senate affair. And there have been very few people, representatives of single-payer interests, who have been able to testify in any of the House hearings. So, what's going on with the establishment bills? We've got Senator Walker's bill in the Senate Finance Committee, and then there's the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, which is chaired by Senator Kennedy, and they are putting out a piece of legislation. And then there's, as Bobby Scott has mentioned, the joint committees of the House have their bill coming out. And the idea is that all of these will be combined into one package that can be sent to President Obama for his signature. What do these bills have in common? One thing they have in common is the mandate that everybody has to have an insurance policy. Or they have to be covered by Medicare, or get their care through Medicare, or have their employer cover them, or be poor enough that they're on Medicaid. If they don't qualify for any of these coverages, then they have to go out and buy a policy. And recognizing that they might not be able to afford that, there will be subsidies to help pay the premiums for these. And this is going to be a very complicated thing. And the Congressional Budget Organization, when they tried to figure out what these plans would cost, they said that with the Kennedy bill, it would be $1 trillion, the base expense, but they hadn't even begun to calculate what would it cost to do all this administrative stuff. That's going to be out of sight. However, where did this subsidy mandates plan come from? Back last November, when we were all celebrating Barack Obama's election, the insurance people were flying. And midway through November, the Blue Cross Association, the National Blue Cross Association, and also the Association of the big insurance companies, the American Health Insurance Plans, came up with announcements that they would commit that their members would not do all the bad things that people have been charging the insurance companies with doing. And they wouldn't reject people because of preconditions, and they wouldn't discriminate, and so on. But they said that before they could make that commitment, the government would have to make the commitment to require everybody to be covered. And then the government would have to commit to subsidize the premiums so that those people could afford it to buy these policies. Well, gee whiz, here's the government handing over 50 million new customers to the insurance companies to pad those profits that I just cited. And then the government would be paying money to help people buy these policies. Now, I find this whole concept offensive. I think that the whole thing is really a slander on the American people. It says that we're such deadbeats that we won't take care of our own health unless we're compelled to it on the penalty of tax hits and excise taxes and things like that. I think that's really kind of scurrilous. And Bobby Scott raised the question of, are we talking about health care as a privilege or as a right? I think everybody would agree here, and President Obama has said it's a right. Well, it's a damn funny right if you're going to be forced to exercise. And, well, the next thing is this public option. And as I hear this debate going on about the public option, I get the feeling that we're all being sort of shunted onto a dead-end society with public option over the side, where we can have a big fight and raise a lot of hell and so on and get all exercised over something that is really secondary to the basic question and is probably not going to be decided in a sensible way. Now, Bobby Scott has talked about the public option that his associates in the House would like to see, that would be a single-payer plan, which would actually provide care to people. What's actually being talked about in the public option is another insurance plan, which, as President Obama said, would have the objective of keeping the insurance companies honest. Well, I don't think that we ought to design any part of our system with the purpose of keeping a bunch of scam artists honest.